Okay, so here we go, and this is about fulfillment, which I've developed over 50 years of involvement, and it's a system of integrating methods of realizing self-fulfillment and achieving greater peace and personal invulnerability without sacrificing empathy. That's quite a mouthful. And I mentioned that we are actually part of a demographic that has studied various modes of enlightenment from EST and stuff like that, Hubbard's work, EFT, EMDR, energy psychology, and various other modalities. And my specialty is biofeedback-guided personal consultations. And most of the people on our mailing list have some familiarity with that. Not everybody, but those people have something in common. Most of us have been promised that we're going to go out the top or go to nirvana or become ascended masters or something like that, and we've become a lot better off than most normal people, but than any normal people really. But some of us become dissatisfied because we never really attained what we were promised, especially when we start to get older and the body's natural planned obsolescence starts to kick in. It becomes frustrating. We have an idea that a lot of our illnesses and unhappiness has to do with our state of mind. We've been given some of the tools for repairing that and for remedying it, but we become, as we become older, painfully aware of the inadequacies. And I believe that I have a lot of, I hate to say answers, I've picked up a lot of secrets and insights that could really help people. And I know this from talking to them. I do sessions on people, and I find out what they're unhappy about, what's messing up their lives. And, sometimes it occurs to me, you've already studied this stuff. What's going on? Why can't you apply it to yourself? And I've realized what is actually going on is that they're missing some information. A lot of it is missing some information. It's not that they haven't done enough work, enough hours, that they haven't had enough sessions. And we'll go into this in a few moments. I'm looking at a list of our responses for the questions. We did a little survey, and one question was in 30 words or less, what do you hope to experience from this webinar? And the other question is, what attracted you about the promotion that we sent out, about this email that made you feel that you wanted to sign up? So I want to address that first thing, the second thing first. What do they like about the promotion? Well, people really seem to like fulfillment, the idea of fulfillment. I was astounded. It kind of came to me. We were looking for a rubric to put all of the information I've gleaned for 50 years that people might be interested in. This came together, and somehow it really connected to people. And it promises something. Each person sees it as different, but each person is looking for something that they have yet to achieve to be fulfilled. So it was a clever promotion. As far as what they want, it varies, but what they want is to be fulfilled, and it varies. It varies quite a bit. Now, some people are just checking it out to compare it with other things that they've done or they've been doing. Some people just like to keep on checking out new methods for attaining awareness and enlightenment. And some people came up with a whole list of things in their personal lives that they would like to change. So I'm going to address these by quickly going over the items that were in the promotion. And first of all, let me just call them out. The first one was freedom from anxiety and apprehension. And we'll go into this and define some terms and go over some of the insights in a few moments. But let me read through these. The second one is freedom from the underlying sadness and disappointment that every normal person lives with. Normal people walk around with an underlying sadness, something that they're frustrated about, something they're disappointed about that never got handled. This becomes part of who they are. And there are things that can be done about it. Even people who have studied clearing or auditing or meditation are walking around with these. The third one is effectively addressing depression for yourself and others. Wow, that's a big one because people don't really know what depression is. And yet they suffer a great deal from it. I mean, the idea of losing somebody like Robin Williams because of depression, with that much talent and that much success, and yet people don't have intelligent things to say about it. It's a mystery. So we're going to look at that. Recognizing and eliminating self-sabotage. We've all experienced self-sabotage, doing something that works against us, that takes us away from our goals. And we'll take a look at that. Freeing yourself from the effects of emotionally and physically traumatic experiences. A lot of people here have learned some form of regression therapy or another. Obvious comes to mind is Dianetics. I call them regression therapies because they consist of going over things that happened in the past and bringing them to consciousness. Why do people who have done this still have difficulties with things that have happened in the past? Free of being compromised by the negative energy and suffering of others. That has a lot of hidden influences. We are connected to each other, and we experience what others are experiencing, whether we like it or not. And a lot of the difficulty that people have, especially people who have worked hard at learning and improving themselves, there are things that go on in their lives and in their minds that are devastating and can eventually kill them. And the source of these things has to do with the negative energy and suffering from other people. Well, what do you do about it? And finally, we talk about being an expert at recognizing and handling all of the categories of negative mental energy in yourself and others. Well, this sounds like a promotion list, and that's how it started out. These are things I think that people want and need and are open to, but there's a lot of hidden inference, there's a lot of hidden wisdom in this. I don't know where I got these things, they just came out of me, and maybe I was channeling them or something. But when I looked at it carefully, I realized that this is actually an outline for whatever all of us need to learn. And there are hidden and subtle inferences there that point to deficiencies, gaps in our knowledge and gaps in our application. And I think I can help you with these. Now, everyone here has studied some form of self-enlightenment technique. And a lot of us are skeptical, cynical even. We've heard it all before, and they're just checking it out because Hank Levin has been around a while, and he's kind of articulate, and he's pushed some buttons here. Let's find out what the hell he's got going. And I doubt very much that there's going to be anything new here. And I want to tell you this. If you're already involved with something that's working for you, you're already engaged, you're meditating, going up the grades, experimenting with mushrooms, whatever you're doing, if it's working for you, keep doing it, okay? I'm not trying to pull you away from what you're doing if it's working. If you feel things can be better, then take a look at this and see if what I'm saying makes sense. Now, You might notice that although those 7 items on that list are highly desirable and even excited about it, they're actually referring to basics. In fact, there are a few people here who have not studied some aspect of most of those items. Now, the reason that most of us feel that we haven't attained these states, these points, these achievements that we've studied is that we've studied within belief parameters that made what we learned incomplete or unworkable. Now, sometimes those parameters were imbued by the very teachers or organizations who were teaching us these insights or truths. Isn't that something? Here's an example. Some of us were taught that upsets are breakdowns in affinity, reality, or communication. Now, this is a very useful paradigm. We call it ARC as an acronym. If you ask someone who has studied this stuff a lot, if they have a break in ARC, do you have an ARC break? They'll usually say, no, I don't have any of those because I learned about ARC breaks and I've attained that level of awareness. And then you ask, is there something you're pissed off about? And they'll say, hell yeah. So what's going on there is they've learned this useful data, but they've learned it through some sort of a screen that they can't really fully apply it, especially apply it to themselves. It's hard to apply this stuff to ourselves, but still, there's something missing. So when I say in my promotion, your past efforts have not been in vain, this is a two-edged sword. It validates, and rightly so, the work you've all done, but it sets up a situation where people might not be willing to empty the cup. Do you know about empty the cup? There's a story about, it's a Sufi story, about the mullah, the teacher, Nasruddin. A young man comes to his house one day and bangs on the door. And Nasruddin opens the door and he says, yes, how can I help you? And the man says, I'm your new student. I've come here to learn with you. And Nasruddin says, why should I want to teach you? And he invites the boy in, and he starts making tea, which is the custom in that part of the world. You may always make tea for a guest. And he says, why do you think I should teach you? And the young man says, I've studied with the best teachers. I've studied in Alexandria. I've memorized the entire Quran. I've studied in Tikrit. I've studied with this great master, and I've studied with that great master. And Nasruddin is pouring the tea and pouring the tea, and the tea is pouring out of the cup. He's over pouring the cup, and it's going all over the table and all over the floor. And the student says, hold ya, teacher, stop it. The cup is full. You're pouring the tea, is going all over the place. The cup, can't you see the cup is full? And Nasruddin says, exactly so. This is why I can't teach you. Your cup is too full. Go away, empty your cup, and come back, and I'll teach you. So what this story illustrates is that when we come to learn something from a particular individual, we have to leave behind what we've studied before. In some parts of the world, when you take a music lesson and the teacher tells you, you should hold the instrument like this in his first lesson, and you tell him, well, my last teacher told me I should hold it like this. He'll tell you, leave. Because what the student has done is a very bad manners for a student. In the United States, however, this is very common. I tell you, well, you should do this. And you say, well, my Sufi master told me I should do that. Okay, so you haven't emptied your cup. So what I'm going to say is one requirement. The first requirement, if we're going to improve what we already have and benefit from new ideas and reframing old ideas, The first requirement is that we have to empty our cup. Okay. I want to go on to two things that block people from seeing the simplicity of putting in basics. Now, a lot of people here, they're expecting that I am going to show them a new higher level that has never been seen before, a new OT level, secret writings from, from the master guru that nobody has ever seen. We're really talking, in a sense, about putting in basics. But there are two things that block people from seeing the validity of this and the simplicity of it. The first one, 12, is in spite of all the indoctrination about spirituality, people usually have no subjective reality that they are not their bodies. They know that they're not their bodies. They know that they have a body, but they don't have the subjective reality. For example, some people think of enlightenment in terms of ascension. They're going to become ascended masters. There's usually an implication there is that they're going to ascend with their own tochitsu, with their own body. You see, their body is going to become white and ethereal, and they're going to ascend, but they're going to ascend with their body because they can't imagine their own identity without their body. You see? And a person who is thinking like that, they don't really have a subjective understanding or reality of themselves without their bodies. Some people have heard this all before. All these ideas originally come from India. We've known about these things for thousands of years. But you ask the person who's saying that questions to find out what is his own subjective reality is, and there is none. In fact, this is a little dicey thing to say, but in my experience, talking to people from India about things like past lives, immortality, Muslims are generally more genuinely curious about them. And a lot of Hindu people have heard about all their lives. They've been indoctrinated, but they haven't had the subjective experience. That's a generality, and there are a lot of exceptions. I'm sure a lot of people from all parts of cultures in India have heard stories of people that remember past lives. But having it banged into your head by a guru since an early age does not give you a subjective reality on it. Now, there's some other imprinted beliefs about fulfillment. One of them is equating euphoria with enlightenment. Euphoria is a physical phenomenon. It's very pleasant, but it's physical. And some people go from one thing to the other when they're seeking enlightenment, and they have a hidden standard. What they're looking for is this feeling of euphoria. This is especially true of people with substantial drug history. If this is going to enlighten me, it's going to make me feel, I'm just going to use the word euphoric, blissful. Okay? And that feeling, as they're describing it, is a physiological phenomenon. Another thing that blocks fulfillment is an obsession with something we call going exterior. Now, most of these people were imprinted by you-know-who. Now, we all go exterior when we're sleeping, when we're daydreaming, but when a person says, my big frustration with all the work I've done is I never went stably exterior with full perceptions. And what they're implying is that, see, this is a special idea in that the body is seen as there. Oh, my body over there instead of here. You can go exterior and expand and expand and expand and go way beyond your body. But your body is still here. Oh, but that's not what the old man meant. He talked about being 3 feet behind your head and seeing the back of your head, and your head is over there. What is the difference between here and there? It has to do with space. If something is in your space, it's here. If something is outside of your space, it's there. If you expand your space enough, that thing over there now becomes here. You see, it's almost a semantic trap, but people get lost on this, and they're given this kind of a false purpose, and because they can't attain that purpose in the exact way that they conceived of it, they end up with an enormous frustration that follows them through their older years. That's sad. If you had to bang your head on this when you're 25, 30 years old, okay, so it's amusing. You know, it's like working out of a bad relationship or something. But when you're dealing with this in your 70s, it's a little sad. It's a waste of energy. Now, there are a couple of other points. One point, of course, was that you are not your body. And another point that people miss is this. And this comes into play when they're dealing with entities, when they're dealing with disembodied spirits, when they're dealing with possession, when they're dealing with what some of us call the OT3 materials. Any other words that we use to talk about spirit influence? Did I say possession?
Beings.
Beings. Yeah, okay. We have all kinds of formulas. I mean, even the Catholic Church has a formulary for exorcism. It embarrasses them a little bit because they try to hide it because they think it makes them look barbaric, you know, like the Inquisition did. But I mean, you can read about it. But everybody has some technique for dealing with disembodied beings, relatives, demonic beings, even people that have died and that we miss. I mean, it's a whole spectrum of relationships that we can have with people that have passed over, or maybe never even had their own body, who may have been sent here, may be here because they're lost. It's a whole realm. Okay, and people are a lot more open to discussing this now than they were in the 50s and early 60s. But there's an insight that I like to share with people that helps a great deal to understand this entire realm of relationship that we have with the other side, with the spirit world, with other beings. And that is this. The difference between someone with a body and someone without a body is highly overrated. What does that mean? Well, the fact is we can talk to anyone we want, wherever they are, and really in any time period. Now, how do I know this? Well, it's a corollary that comes from something that I actually hadn't I hadn't put into my notes, but it's very important. And it has a lot to do with where I got my certainty that I am more than a physical being. And that has to do with accidental experiences that I had with telepathy, just playing with a deck of cards and with somebody in another room and discovering that they could see the cards I was looking at. I became quite interested in this, and I eventually made something of a study of it and accumulated a bunch of books by various people, like Ingo Swan and a number of other people. And I'm actually going to be writing a book on things that people can do as a kind of a parlor games. Some of them I've seen done in theater improv also, but they're kind of quaint, curious things that I find exciting. Some people are scared by it, some people are annoyed by it, but there is an inference, a corollary, that if you can do this, there is no physiological explanation for it. And if what you're actually doing is sending your attention into another room or into another city or across the world, and you can experiment with this with Skype. And part of what we'll do in a course that I'm going to be teaching is having people experiment with this stuff so they get a subjective experience that their thoughts are not really that private. Now, once you understand that, the whole idea of being someone without a body makes a lot more sense to you. I'd love to talk about this a lot more, but I think I have to keep moving on. So these are beliefs that people have that get in the way of implementing higher wisdom. Here's another one. Another lie that, especially in item 7, that you must help yourself before you can help others. You must help yourself before you can help others. There are different ways of people saying this, using various jargon, like I'm going to work on my first dynamic and then I'm going to work on the other dynamic. You know what that means. But it's very common. I don't want to learn how to do healings on people because I have to work first on myself. Well, as a practitioner, I can promise you, you will always be your most difficult client. And you can also help other people even though you're suffering yourself. There are a lot of stories about this that I think I'm going to pass on. But one of the philosophers that I owe a great deal to is Alan Watts. I was in a very, very despondent point in my life, and I was driving along the freeway in Los Angeles, and I was almost in tears with what I had been going through. And I tuned in by accident to a lecture, or part of a lecture by Alan Watts on KPFK. And the name of the lecture was, "Are you doing it or is it doing you?" And it was absolutely brilliant. It was like he was talking right to me. And subsequently, I read quite a bit of Alan Watts. You know, Alan Watts drank himself to death. So with all of his wisdom, he could not really apply everything to himself, but I owe him a lot. And I could say the same thing for a number of other teachers that I've had. So there's another issue that's kind of interesting. I wanted to throw this in because before we get into the long discussion, and that is about the use of a biomonitor. I've worked with a biomonitor. A biomonitor is a particular kind of a skin galvanometer, and you can actually use it for detecting specific thoughts. And the thoughts that it detects most easily are ones that cause stress. I call them negative mental energy thoughts, upsets, quandaries, guilt, and fear. And those read very easily on the biomonitor. They read in a certain way so that you can actually find them, apprehend them, address them, and resolve them. And I've worked with this for a long time. And I've talked to a number of people that have studied this and given up on it because they found it too complicated, too technical. And because of this, I've come up with, simpler and simpler solutions. I've got one here I'll show you in a second if you don't already know what I'm talking about. But, you know, my feeling about doing sessions on someone without a biomonitor is like this. And then I hear practitioners say, well, I used to use it, but I don't use it anymore because I've become psychic. I dealt You know, I've learned how to see people's thoughts, and I just don't need it anymore. And I'll tell you, I'm as psychic as almost any of these people. I wouldn't say any of these people because Norma here is a professional psychic, and you know, she's learned to see what's going on around people, and she was trained to tell them what it was. I don't like to tell them what it is, even if I see what it is, because I want them to discover it themselves. And the other thing is that sometimes I'm wrong. I've heard it said that the most accurate psychic is correct 80% of the time. So that means 20% of the time you're going to be wrong, and you're giving people evaluations, you're giving people wrong indications. Say 20% of the time, not good. You can do better than that. If you're using a biomonitor, you don't tell people what's going on. You ask them, and you can see in the biomonitor whether there's a confirmation or not. And it's a lot easier. It's a lot safer. It allows them to discover what's going on. And I have enough wrong hunches so that, to me, the idea of doing a session, an extended session, professionally without some kind of biomonitor is like flying an airplane without a gyro compass. You can do it. You can just look out the window in an airplane, and if you're a good pilot, you can fly. You can even learn to fly straight and level, which is hard to do without any instruments whatsoever. You can kind of learn how to do it, but if you go and take a trip or try to fly at night without instruments, you got to be crazy. And especially when it's just a few $100s for the instruments. Okay, the consequences of making mistakes here that are easily avoidable are just too great to not use it. So one objection that people have had with biomonitors is they're hard to learn to read. And so I came up with this one called the InnerTrac, and it's very easy to learn to read. And it shows you things with colored lights, and you can ask people questions. Or even if you're using something that's not talk therapy, if you're using EFT, where you find something and you have them hold it in their mind, and you tap on various meridians, and this actually relieves things. It works. It's quite effective. Some people don't have an aversion to getting into the narrative of things, and they just want to work directly on them energetically. But you still have to know what you're working on. And this helps you to find it very, very easily. Last week we had a whole webinar on this, and some people came in that use them in their practices. So I want to discuss each of those 7 items. We were wondering how to organize this so that you get an idea of what fulfillment is about. And the way I want to do this is talk about each of these items, and I don't have a lot of notes, so I'm going to work just off the top of my mind, and Norma's going to help me and prompt me occasionally when I have a senior moment. Okay, so the very first idea, the very first concept was that of freedom from anxiety and apprehension. Now, obviously, we can do a whole workshop on each one of these 7 items, but I want to just share a couple of insights about each one so that you can get an idea of where we're going with this. Anxiety and apprehension. Anxiety is a feeling. For most people, it's a physiological feeling. It's unpleasant. It's most often associated with fear. But there are other things that can make you feel anxious. Unfinished business, incomplete cycles, worrying that somebody's going to find out something about you, having an engagement to go to a party and knowing there's going to be somebody there that you don't like or who doesn't like you, knowing that what you're doing is not working but not knowing what else to do, not seeing an alternative, and so you keep on doing it. And you get more and more uptight about this. Eventually, these anxieties, various anxieties, they become physiological. They start to affect your endocrine system, and they can kill you. And more about that in some of the subsequent items. But apprehension is essentially fear of what's going to happen. A big subject that causes anxiety and apprehension is money. We are not taught usually about the basics of money, and because of not being taught about the basics of money has similar consequences to not being taught about the basics of sex. I have no idea what caused it, right? So it's important for us to understand these things. But this is the nature of anxiety and apprehension. So it's caused essentially by these 4 kinds of negative mental energy, and also by stuff having to do with other people's anxiety. Okay, I think we can go to the next one, which is freedom from the underlying sadness and disappointment that every normal person lives with. Okay, sadness, people experience it kind of as a feeling, but what it comes from is from an upset that has gone on too long. The person feels sad or disappointed. Now, grief can cause this too, loss, losing a loved one, losing a pet, losing a girlfriend, losing a relationship, losing an opportunity, performing in a competitive concert and screwing it up, so you've lost your possibility of a scholarship and recognition. All of these things can cause a sadness that goes on and on and on. It keeps on giving. And the fact is, every normal person has something like this. Okay? Is there something that if you ask a person using a biomonitor, is there something you feel sad about deep down? Well, some people will say yes, and some people will say no. But almost everybody will get an instantaneous read indicating that they have accumulated negative energy somewhere in their body from something that they're sad about that never got handled. And there are ways to handle this. The thing that frustrates me is that many of us have learned techniques for dealing with this, but we're still sad and we're still experiencing disappointment. And I would like to see people have the tools to work with this for themselves and other people. I know there are things that they can do, and it frustrates me that I can't share it. Next. Depression is an interesting subject. It's actually a big business. Telling people that you can cure depression is politically dangerous because it's such a big business. It's like telling them you can cure cancer. The authorities will come after you. It's against the law to claim to cure depression with anything except drugs in most localities. And yet depression is not that difficult. The anatomy of depression is, it's the next stage after sadness. Start out with sadness, going on too long. You start out with an upset. It's going on too long. The person walks around sad for a while. And there's a certain point where they come to an understanding with themselves, a belief, a decision. This is not going to get better. I just have to learn to live with it. And then something starts to happen to their endocrine system. When they try to adjust to this sadness, it's always going to be there. They become depressed. it screws them up, and it can make them self-destructive, and even sadder, it can destroy a family. Can you imagine having a father or a mother who's chronically depressed? This is very toxic to the environment. And so there are things that can be done about it. Why isn't anybody talking about this? Well, there's a belief in our culture that depression is caused by an insufficiency of prescription drugs in your bloodstream. And to buck that is to try to go back to, it's like going back to the 1600s and explaining aerodynamics to people that, hey, you see this little model airplane I made, I'm going to throw it, and if it goes down the street, make a big one, people can fly in it. They'll drag you to the priest and punish you for saying such blasphemous things. So depression is a very sacred ailment, and we know how to deal with it. And the way we deal with it makes a lot of money, and you stay out of it. Okay. There are things that can be done with depression, and I'd like to share them. The next one is self-sabotage. Self-sabotage, I mean, we have all had the experience of doing and saying things that have screwed up our opportunities or screwed up our relationships. My God, why did I do this? Usually, people don't even know they're doing it. They don't even get to the point of enlightenment where they ask the question, why did I screw this up? They don't know that they screwed it up. They feel picked on. They feel victimized. Most of the people in a penitentiary, if you ask them why they're there, well, it's because somebody ratted on me. It's because this. It's because my father, you know, my parents abandoned me. It's because my damn wife left me, or went to sleep with my friend, or something like it. It all happened to them, and they don't see it as something that they created. Even a person who sees that they created, I don't know why I went and slept with my secretary. I had a perfectly good marriage. My wife found out, and now it's all going to hell. Why did I do this? I don't know why I did this. Where do I go? Go to a psychiatrist, psychologist? Are they going to tell me why I did it? They'll take a few $1,000s from me for sessions, but you know, I still don't know why I did this. Even energy psychology, which is, you know, relatively enlightened and advanced, believes that self-sabotage is the result of electrical polarities in the brain being reversed. So the positives become the negatives, and they should be returned. They have little rituals that they do to adjust the shift in polarities, and that's what self-sabotage comes from. It's a specious idea. Specious means it's plausible, but it doesn't work. It doesn't actually work. It helps to explain to somebody why it's happening, but it doesn't give you, it's like explaining how an automobile runs on chicken soup. I mean, you can come up with with sophisticated theory, but you can't fix the automobile. You'll know nothing about adjusting carburetors or fuel injection or anything like that, because your basics are just so out of whack. It actually has to do with one of those 4 negative mental energies I call quandaries, which is opposing goals. Well, why would a person have opposing goals? Well, you know, there's another item here that should have been the outline. It is possible to have a thought or a belief and not know that you have it. You should write that down. It's possible to have a thought or a belief and not know you have it. That's like having a file running in your computer, but you don't see it up on the monitor. So you can't turn it off, and you can't fix it or change it or delete it because you don't see it, but it's there. So a person can have a goal or an intention and have another one, and he's only conscious of one of them. Okay, I want to start my own business. For years, I've wanted to start my own business. I never started my own business. I've tried and I've tried. I can't start my own business. What opposing goal does the person have? Well, he starts out saying, I don't know. He's saying you have to talk to him for a while because he doesn't know what the opposing goal is. You talk to him for a while and you fish out the incongruences and you find out that he has another goal, and that is financial security. And in his world, not my world, but in his world, maybe not your world, but in his world, being in business for yourself is very unstable and it's not financially secure. He's never looked at this. So he tries to start a business, it fails. Tries to start a business, it fails. Tries to start a business. Here's a great example. My ex-wife was a real estate agent, and she had me sit there in an open house, waiting for clients to come in. She had another one she had to attend. So I sat there, not selling property, but I was playing guitar. And somebody came in, and it turned out to be the owner. She's not supposed to be there. And she started dusting things off and closing doors and trying to make the place look good. The rules are the owner stays out of the house, let the agent sell it. So I talked to her for a little bit, and she told me that the house has been on the market for a year. And she's desperate to sell it. And she doesn't know why she can't sell it. And I just asked her, sitting there with a guitar, and I asked her, is there something that's important to you? Some way that somehow you would lose if you sold the house? And right away she said, and it doesn't always happen right away, she said, well, my mother's in a nursing home a few blocks away, and if I sell the house, she's afraid that I might not come to visit her anymore. Good, thank you. She seemed a little relieved, and she left. She sold the house the next day. Okay, so that's how that sort of a thing works. Self-sabotage. Next is to free yourself from the effects of emotionally and physically traumatic experiences. Now, most of us have had some kind of experience with therapies that are supposed to remedy this. There are regressions, past life regressions. Dianetics was a big one. In the 50s, a book was published, and a lot of people used it and found it actually did shake things up quite a bit. They got good gains from this, but it only worked up to a certain point. One of the things that happens is, especially old-time Dianetic folks, there are people that have been doing this for at least 50 years. There's an idea there, a condition. There's an idea there. It actually comes with the book. It's imprinted by the book and by the author of the book that you're in the condition that you're in because of what's been done to you, and that you've accumulated engrams. And so you have to go back and erase these engrams, and you erase engrams. People do this for years. I know people who have done this for many, many, many years. They're in their 70s, and they're dismayed because they have engrams they haven't been able to get rid of. And part of the trap here is kind of a technical thing. Part of that whole Dianetic theory is that engrams can occur in chains. It's not enough, sometimes, not enough to just handle one incident. That incidents actually occur in a series, in chains, earlier and earlier and earlier. I think that idea was actually, quote, borrowed, unquote, from somebody named Korzybski. But this was incorporated into Dianetics, and the whole idea was when you stumble on a chain of incidents, to go back earlier and earlier and earlier until you find what they call the basic, the very first incident. When you handle that very first incident, the rest of the chain flows. It disappears. It becomes discharged. It's a specious theory, and there are people who have dealt with this, that they've attained gains, But I also know plenty of people that have gone back further and further and further, previous lifetimes, previous existences, previous universes, trying to find the basic. And you've got these like 75-year-old geezers that are still trying to find the basic on why his wife broke his heart and left him. And it's, I mean, you can look at it with amusement, but these people are suffering very often. And they've got this idea, they know what needs to be done, they need to run out the rest of their engrams. And I know that there are people on this call who have had that same indoctrination, and they're wondering why, what they have to do to handle all these things that have been done to them. Okay, we might have lost one right there. I mean, not to scramble somebody's stable data, but from years of running sessions, and I'm very good at it. I'm very good at running regression sessions, regression therapy. And I've written about some new angles in my book, how to run entire lifetimes in a session, and a few other things. What I found was that the thing that takes the charge off of a chain of traumatic incidents, whether it's this lifetime or more than one lifetime, specific lifetimes are kind of an illusion anyhow. But the thing that discharges the malady, so to speak, is when the being perceives a balance. Well, this implies very strongly that you cannot really discharge an entire chain by just running what's been done to the person as a victim. The person has done things to other people, that holds it in place. The person has been involved with other people who are undergoing this whole drama, and their own role in that drama is affecting them. Okay? You might recognize that I'm talking about flows. But what occurs and what you're looking for to really get this to dissolve, to delete, is when the person perceives a balance between the two sides, between the flows of him being victimized and victimizing another. And this raises a lot of interesting questions that we'll handle in a subsequent course, like what happens when a child is victimized. I mean, what's the balance there? And there are answers to that, and I'd love to share that at a later time. So that has to do with trauma, traumatic experiences. Number 6 is the freedom from being compromised by the negative energy and suffering of others. This is actually quite profound. There's more to this than the words might infer. We share each other's thoughts. We share each other's feelings. The only time that people normally experiment with this, try to be cause over it, is when they're flirting. Because if you're trying to get her attention and she knows you're hitting on her, she might snub you. But if you can make her think that it's her idea, she'll walk over to your table in a restaurant and give you her phone number on a matchbook cover. You see, you've got to make her think it's her idea. I mean, we can't even get our cat to come into the house unless she thinks it's her idea. You see, so we do this all the time. We've seen situations where a person at work gives a suggestion and the boss blows it off. But if you make him think that it was his idea, he might implement it. You might not get credit that you wanted, but you can get the idea implemented. these are kind of benevolent situations. There are situations that use the same mechanism, and I call the mechanism misownership. It's not an entirely original concept with me, but I see how far it goes. A lot of people are living in situations where they are being suppressed. In other words, somebody is stealing energy from you, and it's making them unsuccessful, it's making them unhappy, it's making them sick. Did I say unstable? And the only way that somebody can suppress you is to use your own energy against you. So he has to find something, and people do this with each other telepathically. I think of it as an offensive move, but really they think they're doing it in defense, because if they don't do it to you, you're going to do it to them, right? So if they can go into your space, into your aura, into your mental pictures, and find something that is compromised, that you feel guilty about, for instance, and they can use this to get you to do something against your own welfare, well-being, well, that's the mechanism of them suppressing you. And the way they get you to do this is you get this thought, which is hatred for yourself, okay, it's coming from out there, and you misown it. You think, God, I just had this thought that I'm worthless, that I deserve what's happening to me. I must be worthless. This must be the way I feel. You see this in abusive relationships all the time, this mechanism. This mechanism of misownership is also, it's a mechanism, almost mechanical, like the atomization of fuel, so it will burn in your car. It's a mechanism, and it's also the mechanism behind what some people call spirit possession or spirit influence. Okay, a spirit, in order to influence you, has to find somewhere in your beingness a predisposition to do this thing that he's trying to manipulate you into. If he can't, he's wasting his energy. And his energy is valuable, so he'll go find somebody else that he can do this with. This is the underlying, so misownership is the underlying mechanism behind suppression, spirit influence, all the OT3 materials, if you know what that is. It's got beings in one space that one has to get rid of in order to improve. Of course, if you have beings in your space, how do you make them go away? Because in that universe, there is no away, because it's more like a radio station passing through you. And the real question is not what's it doing there, but why are you reacting to it? You see? So these are things that we can look at. This is a huge area, and there's a lot that we can learn there, and we can take things that we've already learned and just tweak them a little bit and make them way more useful and way more effective. The final object, the final item, how are we doing for time here?
2:16.
Okay. Good. The other item is becoming an expert in recognizing and handling all the categories of negative mental energy. And I mentioned 4 categories: upsets, quandaries, guilt, and fear. And also I mentioned misownership. And of course, you can misown energy from an upset. You can misown energy from a quandary. You can misown energy from guilt, which we didn't talk about guilt, but it's one of them. And you can also misown energy from fear. And fear generally is a feeling, by the way, that it didn't say this when it came up. It's a feeling, a physiological feeling that comes about in the presence of certain mental images. And the mental images are, well, traumas, physical or mental or situational traumas that never happen again. And so that's another form of disowned negative mental energy. So why do we talk about becoming an expert in recognizing and handling all of these things? Now, we're bumping here into another, I don't like to use the word implanted, induced belief, a belief that I can't fix other people. I need to be handled myself. And I have to tell you, after 50 years of dealing with this stuff, quite selfishly sometimes, I'm not an altruist. I don't think I'm an altruist. I certainly didn't start out as an altruist. But it's always been evident that it's easier to help someone else than it is to help yourself. Somebody gave me a demonstration a long time ago. I want to share it with you. I was walking in New York from one party to another with a guy, and it was very cold outside and very windy. And we were in shirt sleeves. And this other guy he was a trainer, and he showed me something that's always stayed with me. We were walking along the street. We had maybe 2 blocks to go, and it was bitterly cold. And he seemed quite comfortable. And I asked him, how do you stay comfortable? I'm huddled up. I'm trying to walk fast. I'm freezing. And he said, well, just flow heat to other people. What do you mean? Well, you flow heat from your own body to other people. It's like I'm flowing heat to you right now. You feel it? And I kind of felt it, sure. But I could see he was comfortable. He said, try it. So I saw somebody coming down the sidewalk, and I just intended to make him warm by flowing heat from my body to him. And damn it, it worked. It worked. By being the source of heat, my own body, well, got warm. I could say it rose above the need for external heat. I don't know how you want to analyze it, but it just bloody worked. And I used that for years afterwards. One time I used it, I was up in the mountains with a friend on motorcycles. We went up into the mountains near Los Angeles. I forget the name of it. And it was a hot day where we were in Los Angeles, in Glendale. But we were driving up the mountains. We went way up the mountains, and the weather changed. And we're riding motorcycles in like short sleeves, and it started raining, and it was cold. It was extremely cold. We turned around and started coming back, and it was very dangerous. I mean, it was so cold you couldn't think, and you couldn't move, you barely control the instrument, the motorcycle. And so I was flowing heat to my friend Eric, and it got me through the whole trip. It worked. It still worked. It worked then, and it still works now. So the point is that you are able to help other people. You're able to heal other people. And in order for you to handle the tendencies for you to be suppressed, or for you to be unduly influenced, in order for you to be the effect of deep anger and disappointment, you have to get to the point where you can help other people to do this. You have to do this. There is no protocol where you can go and sit in front of a practitioner or a guru and have them do it for you. There are people who can do it for you. You can do it for other people. But ultimately, this is not empowering. If you want to empower yourself, you have to be able to do this with other people. And you have to be careful of that belief that I can't heal somebody else until I heal myself, because that'll stop you cold. Okay? So you have an idea of how all of these things work, and I'd like to open this to discussion for right now. And so we don't have in this platform a show of hands, but what I'd like to do is have you use your chat window. We actually have somebody who has a question there. Let's read that. We have a few questions. Could you tell me what they are? I can't see from here.
Oh. Did you say you wrote a book of parlor tricks title?
I'm working on it. I don't have a title yet. And they are things that you can do with cards, things that you can do with people going in another room and drawing a picture, and everyone else trying to draw the same picture. It's very exciting. There are things that you can do these things over the internet. Not transmitting pictures over the internet, but conversing. You don't have to have, it doesn't have to be somebody in the next room who walks out of the room. It could be somebody in Paris, if you know somebody. I mean, I know people all over the world, and I've done this. And you learn a lot. You learn a lot about yourself and about other people.
The other question asked you to speak a little more loudly.
A little more loudly. Is there anybody else having that problem? Would you show me in the chat? I think that what is happening is you need to raise the sound on your computer. You can go into your audio, your WebEx audio. Why don't you do that as we speak, so that I see what's going on. Audio, and there's a pull-down menu, and the second one is speaker microphone audio test. Okay, and open that for a moment.
Hmm? I think it was handled.
Oh, it was handled?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
You can also change the volume on your own computer.
Yeah. The explanation was the sound was up all the way. It was only when you were telling one of your stories. Normally, the sound was fine.
Only when I was telling the story. Did I become quiet when I was telling the story? Maybe when I'm looking away at Norma.
Yeah.
Does that make a difference? I can't tell.
Yeah. We have another question.
Yes.
What is the subject of, and when is your next webinar? Which segues perfectly into...
Yes. Okay. We are going to do a course called Fulfillment. And if what you've seen today resonates with you, I've designed a 7-step instruction series of live online web workshops designed to ensure that you're able to implement and attain each of these 7 conditions. You can call them states, 7 states. They're really abilities is what we're talking about. Now, remember, if you're listening to this presentation, you've already invested a lot in these. We're just going to be working on clearing out the final barriers to you fully owning each of those 7 things that we went through. Okay. It'll be condensed into 4 workshops, and each one will be 3 hours in length. That's 12 hours of interactive instruction. At $50 an hour, the cost should be $150 for each workshop, and that's $700 for the series. But I'm going to discount it down for today's webinar attendees to $450 for the entire series. And This comes with a guarantee. If you take the entire series, you have to take all of the course, all of the workshops, and you feel it wasn't worth it to you, I'll refund your entire amount. No arguments. Now, and for that, this time you can't lose. This time you can't lose. Now, to get it, you go to www.innertrac.com/fulfillment-workshop.html. And fulfillment, for some reason, has to be capitalized, and there has to be a space after fulfillment. Okay, because that's a little bit tricky to write down, and you might have a little trouble with it. I will send everybody on this, in this workshop, this webinar right now, I will send you an email with a link to that sign-up page, okay? And it'll have the sign-up information. And I think that is about the end of it. I'd like to find out if anybody else has any questions.
Any comments?
Questions, comments, anything? Crickets.
Can I ask a question here?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering what kinds of materials, if there will be some handouts or things like that from the webinar, from the course?
For the course, yes, there will. There will be. There will be. It'll probably be. It'll be necessary to purchase one of my books that has a lot of this information in it. I'll put together a syllabus. I don't have it specifically laid out for the course itself, but that's not a problem. The course will probably start in about 2 weeks, and we're trying to decide whether to make it Saturdays or Sundays. And of course, when you're working with a lot of people, including ourselves, we sort that out. Does that answer your question?
I just muted her.
Okay. Okay. I think you can unmute yourself by clicking on the to the right of your name on your screen. There's a microphone, and it's already got a cross on it, but it's black. I know it's red, probably red. If you click on it, it will turn black, and then we can hear you. So if you have a question, just unmute yourself. And
I didn't hear the last part of what you said about, you said you're trying to decide if it's Saturday or Sunday, and then you said something that went out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we'd like to choose a day that the most people can sign up for.
Or a combination.
Or
a combination of days.
Yeah, combination. Yeah, it could be Saturdays one week or Sundays another week.
And so the book will be something to purchase in addition to the course?
Okay. Okay, is speaking.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, Kay, you have the book, but that's a good question.
Oh, that one, okay.
Okay.
So I don't have to wait for it to ship.
No, you don't have to wait for it to ship to New Zealand. Thank you, though. What I'll probably do is give a discount to the book. The actual book itself that you have is almost gone. We have only a few more of them, and we'll probably have to republish a version of it. But materials will be provided one way or the other. You will probably want to have some kind of a biomonitor. If it's not the InnerTrac, if you have an old Hubbard meter of some kind, that would work. Or we can make some kind of an arrangement with you if you have nothing whatsoever. But it's important when you're learning about people's minds and even yourself to have some kind of a mechanism for seeing the thoughts that can't be seen. And we have that, so why try to do without it? Any other questions?
What's the title of the book?
The title of the book is Clearing: A Guide for Professionals. And you can actually get that on Amazon.
Yeah, I think I've already got it.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Do you have any questions, Norma?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Like I said, we'll send the sign-up information out in emails, and I think that's about it. How are we doing for time? I think we're actually
2:34.
2:34. Pretty much on time. So thank you very much for coming, and I'd love to hear your comments. And we'll see you the next webinar.